open topic today. We will be discussing special strikes. So currently in this edition, we have 5 special strikes: Feint and Stab, Pierce, Bash, Stun, and Whirl. And I don't know if it's general consensus, but at least locally, we see Feint and Pierce, but not the other ones so much. Would you guys agree with that?
Totally.
Yeah, I think the next highest one that we use is probably Bash. I mean, at least like personally, but that's just because I've been messing around with Grimhammers a lot more, and they have hammers, so I've tried that one out. That one's probably the next one. I don't know about the like Stun and Whirl, but that might just be because not a lot of models have access to like club staffs and flails and whips and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so I think axes and swords are some of the more common weapons, especially on warriors.
Before we get started, we just want to recognize and shout out our patrons. Thank you all for your support. You guys are awesome. If you are interested in more content or other perks that we have, please visit our Patreon page, link in the description.
Let's go through them in order. For Feint and Stab, last edition, it was almost like a no-brainer in certain situations because any model could feint at all times. First of all, there was no stab. So if you had a lower fight value than your opponent, you always feint because your fight value is lower anyway. And so there was no decision. It was just, and now you have to have equal or higher fight value in order to feint. Otherwise, it would count as a stab. So what situations would you usually feint? And do you guys ever use stab?
So I guess feinting would be kind of like how you described the last edition, which I didn't play, but I think I would only feint if there's no penalties. So either my fight value is high enough that dropping it, I would still be able to come out on top, or if I have like a support with higher fight value or equal fight value, then there's really no penalty. So that way I can get the reroll ones. I don't think it's important enough most of the time to lower your fight value to a point where you have lower than your enemy just to get the potential reroll ones to wound. So that's pretty straightforward. But then with the stab, I kind of like it in the cases where, let's say you were trying to end the scenario at a certain point, allowing you to win the game because you have the objectives, which allows you to kind of, in a way, kill your own army indirectly. So I think that's a really cool trick.
Guys, watch out.
Everyone knows about this trick, though.
We already know their secret.
Interesting fact, Farmer Tolman Cotton from Shire Army of the Shire, he has a pitchfork which allows him to stab, but he doesn't have the option to feint. That's really weird. I just read the other day. I also use stab when my army is already broken. So I already know that my opponent scored on that objective. So you don't care as much if your model dies and you just want to kill as many as possible, then I might also use stab. But for feinting, yeah, I think there are still situations where it's a no-brainer. Like if you have a spear support, then the front model pretty much always feints, right? Unless the model in the front has a higher fight and you want to use that fight. Otherwise, you probably just always feint, roll like separate colored dice, and then use the fight value of the model behind. And then in the rare situation where your model has a really high fight value and the model you're fighting is less than 3 fight value lower, so like let's say like a Balrog or like a Thranduil, if they're fighting like a low fight value model, they just always feint, always get those rerolls. I agree with Richard, like you probably only use it when there's no risk of losing fight value over your opponent.
I think that's a good shout with the high fight value models like the Balrog or Thranduil. I always forget, like, if you're fighting just a normal dude with, like, fight 3, like, just always feint. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, that's a big thing for elven armies, too, or any army where you have, like, fight 4, fight 5 spear supports, and you have your big heroes going into normal troops that are fight 3. Just try and get it in your head to remember to feint, because it is just super handy to help you get the more dice to kill. As for stabbing, I agree. Like, the only times I'd really consider it is if I want to try and kill my army, or if I'm just, like, ahead on the kill count, I'm not worried about breaking, and I just need to try and break them faster, then I might try it. The other situation is if I've got a big enemy hero surrounded and I'm likely to win the fight, and I just want as many dice and as many rerolls as I can get to try and kill them in that one turn, then I would stab with whoever can, because you're probably going to win the fight anyway, so who cares?
Yeah, and I've also seen you combine, and Richard too, I've seen you guys combine feint with two-handed to do a two-handed feint.
Basically, whenever I go two-handed, it's probably with like an elf that has their hand and a half sword. So in that case, I don't think there's any reason not to feint, because like you're already probably a higher fight value anyway. Obviously, the rerolling ones is better on a dice that's going to wound on a higher percent chance, right?
And most of the time when we two-handed, it's when we stack the fights, like you just said. It's like we have the higher fight in the combat, and then we have the enemy surrounded. So let's have a couple models two-handed feint just to guarantee the kill.
One more thing about stab. First time I used it, I thought that the model takes the damage immediately, the strength 2 hit after you stab, but no, it's at the end of the combat. So it's unfortunate, but you can't use it to deny your enemy kills, because your enemy gets to strike you first before you strike yourself.
You got a dirty mind, little man.
I'm just seeing Charles trying to like deny his enemy kills only to find out that his enemy is going to kill him first anyways.
I will say the funniest situation I've had with stab that I could think of is when I was playing against Goblin Town, and I had my airborne dwarves with a whole bunch of the Grimhammers. So my opponent was trying to stab to kill his goblins, so he'd get to 25% and end the game because he had the relic. And then I was trying to bash him so I could knock him over and not kill him. It was like the stupidest thing, because the dwarves would just knock over the goblins, and then the goblins would just keep on falling on their sword. It was so stupid, but it was really funny.
Yeah, that's a good use for bash and stun when we get to it.
Yeah, non-lethal strikes. Well, we don't have to go in order, so let's talk about bash. So bash is a non-lethal special strike where if you choose to bash, you roll a d6 and then you add your strength and then you compare with your opponent's strength plus a d6. And then whoever has a higher score wins, and if you win, then your opponent is knocked prone. I think this one is kind of underrated because I think that's really good.
Yeah, I think if you do the math, especially on a strength 4 model like a Morannon Orc or something, if you win the fight against the hero, you actually have a higher chance to knock him prone than killing the horse because you win ties, right? You knock him to the ground on ties.
Yes.
So yeah, most heroes are strength 4. So if you're going up against a strength 4 hero, it's actually statistically more likely. And then also the fact that if you kill the horse, you don't roll for the thrown rider until the end of the fight. Whereas if it's bash, the hero is instantly prone. So if you have other following attacks, then you get a double strike on that hero. So it's actually much better.
This is like anti-Felby's tactic number 1.
I think it's glossed over as like a useless or less useful special strike because it doesn't do any damage. But I think it's just hidden because if you have a multiple combat, like giving the rest of your models in that combat double strikes, it probably more than makes up for one attack warrior losing his ability to throw one dice at the enemy to strike.
Well, the big thing with this, and I remember when this rule first came out, people were saying, like, if you put your standard fighting line, you have your front guy bash and your back guy still supporting. If the bash is successful, you're still getting 2 dice, right, at that same strength value to wound. But now next turn, when you charge in, if you win the fight, you're going to have 4 dice, right? So it gives you a lot of tactical options, but the issue is just not a ton of models have options for them. Like, I think Morannon Orcs are probably the best shout out for generic troops that can get access to this.
I was just going to mention, the rules do state that going two-handed bash, it gives you a +1 on that roll. So this makes, like, we were talking about the Cirith Legendary Legion from Quest of the Ring Bearer. And Mordor Uruk-hai are like, you don't see them that much, but in that Legion, when you're forced to take it, I actually think this two-handed mace could be kind of good. If you tag one with like Shelob or Shagrat, getting that +1 to knock to the ground, it could be pretty easy because the Mordor Uruk-hai are also strength 4.
You'll be matching the enemy hero strength probably, right? And then you'll have the +1 for declaring it, and you win on ties when you're rolling the d6. So those are really good odds, honestly, of dehorsing somebody.
And I don't think you can prevent it with like a horse lord or something, right? I think because the wording is just you're instantly prone, so you can dehorse like a Shadowfax too.
Yeah, because Horse Lord is using your fate to save wounds, and you're not dealing a wound to the horse. So I don't see a reason why the hero would be able to use Horse Lord.
Yeah, because bash, you're not doing the wound to the horse, you're just banishing it to the Shadow Realm. Like, it's great.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I mean, aside from the Morannon Orc with
Alex,
the axe...
Galadriel can't bash.
She can banish.
No, aside from the Morannon Orc with the axe, the Morannon Orc with the mace is far and away my favorite. I bash whenever possible in those situations, and people always give me a bit of a funny look. But it really is. If it goes off, statistically, if you successfully bash, you are significantly increasing your chances. So I think it's really underrated. No one really talks about it that much, but it's really powerful. I think the reason we don't see it or people don't talk about it so much is because it really takes a bit of timing. It's not like Feint or Piercing Strike where you can just do it in a random combat. I think you have to time it. It has to have its moment. You can't just do it in every combat.
So I think what we're saying is maybe there is a use for those Iron Hills dwarf like warriors that have hammers. Because they do look cool.
Thematics.
No.
No.
They're so
Nice try.
overcosted compared to
Yeah.
like a Grimhammer. If you just put their profiles side by side.
But they look cool.
I'll say if they were a
Like-
hand and a half, I would be closer to trying to take them, but
I
it's
think
not
they
even
are.
a hand and a half.
I thought it was the same weapon that the Grimhammers have. isn't it?
No. They have swords, but if you want to pierce or bash with them, you have to go two-hand.
Pulling out my book right now.
I've considered it so many times, so I'm pretty confident. Also, there's just no way to use the shield wall, so.
Oh, you're right. It is just two-handed. Lame. But that means you'll always have that extra +1 if you do bash.
Okay, I want to see you at the next tournament with full warband of them.
Oh, hell no, dude. I'm not paying like $40 for 3 models. I'm not there right now. I'm happy. I have my 1 warband of Iron Hills. I'm good. But I'm just saying, like, I know we've trash talked those models before, maybe not on the podcast, but now that we're talking about Bash again, I think maybe there is a use for them. So if you want to take them in your list. But more
I know their uses and they are few. It's one. Bash.
That I had died and
Bash.
lived.
yeah, that's like the only reason you'd ever take.
The next special strike we're going to cover is Piercing Strike. This is arguably the most sought after, the most common one. And it's basically, if you're piercing striking, you lose D3 defense for that turn. And in turn, you get 1 more strength when you strike. So how often do you guys use this? Because I see this getting talked about a lot.
So this is the special strike that kind of changed the game when it was introduced. Purely because you used to end up with 2 walls of troops quite often smacking into each other, and they would both need 6s to kill, and nothing would happen. This one was really big because it allowed your troops to go up in strength by a lot. Like, it used to be D3, now it's just by 1, but it still makes a big difference, right? I'd say it's probably the best strike. I think it is the best strike.
We can rank them at the end.
But yeah, okay, we'll get to that at the end then, yeah. But just that versatility, allowing you to wound easier, is huge. And because it only reduces your defense by D3, that only matters if you're going to lose the fight. So if you're fairly confident you're going to win the fight, then there's no reason not to. I mean, there's other analysis out there of like when you should piercing strike, but yeah, I'd say it's always good to have with you in your list. And if you have models that can take it, I would go for it.
I think I'm going to go with Ian on this one. It's my favorite for sure. In my Khazad-dûm list, obviously I have a ton of axes, so every model can use it. It's fantastic because when I look at my dwarf warriors, standard dwarf warriors, strength 3, I'm up against a line of troops that's defense 6. If I'm within range of a banner, especially if I have the fight value advantage, oh yeah, I'm definitely striking because that difference of going from strength 3 to 4 against defense 6, it's fantastic. I do it wherever I can within reason.
So I hear you guys from the old edition talk about the D3 strength, and I just think that's disgusting.
It was absolutely insane.
That's like heroic strength on every single warrior.
Yeah, well, that was the reason why when we first read the book, we went, heroic strength, that's terrible. I used to get this for free, now I have to pay a might point for it, right? But this is why my Lake Elf list was so bad, Richard. Strength 6, fight 5 fishermen. It's disgusting.
And no wonder people used to just glue axes on everyone.
Because you didn't have to pay a point for it. So you glue it on all your defense 3 like elves, and you don't care about your defense. And do you guys ever think about like how much your enemy would take to wound you if you piercing strike? Like, does that ever factor in? Let's say you're like a defense 5 warrior, and then you're facing like a strength 3 opponent, and you think like, okay, if I go down 1 defense, still the same to wound me, so I would have to roll a 4+ for the opponent to get a better wounding advantage. Because I know in the heat of the game, sometimes it's hard to make those calculations, but like, do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's kind of where it is for me. So like if I'm defense 6 and I have a piercing striking weapon and I'm facing a strength 3 warrior, I'm not going to Piercing Strike unless I'm pretty confident of winning the fight, because that immediately increases their chance to wound if they win. But like in that kind of situation, like you're saying, where it's higher, then it's more likely to consider, right? But I don't think I would do it like flat out every combat unless you have the numbers and you're not really worried. Like if it's on like Lake Town Militia where it's a 6-point model and you don't really care if they die, or like an orc and you have the numbers to replace the guys up front, then it might be worth doing en masse, just because you don't care if they die, and the benefit of getting those, if you're going to win all those fights, is better than the negative. But it is more of like a basis by basis kind of thing. Unless you're playing Goblin Town, in which case you're always just going to do it like every time.
In Horde armies, it's easy just because you're like, I have 60 troops. I'm going to play essentially with complete disregard to whether or not I lose a handful of models for the high reward in a lot of situations. I do try and do the calculations in my head really quickly, both whether or not the Piercing Strike would help me wound and whether or not it would affect my opponent's roll to wound me if I lose. But yeah, sometimes I struggle in the heat of the moment to do basic math or to know the profile off the top of my head.
One more thought on Pierce is that it kind of has the same utility as Stab, which you can't directly kill yourself, but if you're fighting a troop who doesn't have a non-lethal weapon like a bashing weapon or a shield, and you're trying to kill yourself to end the game, Piercing is also a good way to do that.
Yeah, and this one also does stack with two-handed weapons, so again, quite often, I know I'll do this. If I have a model with a two-handed axe, I'll Piercing Strike and go two-handed because it just increases your chances to wound most of the time. I will say that is one thing that I've noticed some people do. Whenever they see a model with an axe, they just go, oh, I'm going to Piercing Strike. And then I go, okay, well, I have a defense 7 model and you're strength 3, so the change isn't going to make any difference. If you want to, you can. It's easier for me to kill you, but usually they don't actually want that, so it's not an auto thing. Like, you got to make sure you think about it, but
you don't get like the common phrase last edition where at the start of the game, your opponent will say, every model is always fainting unless I say they're not. Every model is always piercing unless I say they're not. Because you know they have a defense 3 army with potential strength 6 running at you.
Insanity.
Fainting!
I'm just happy nobody discovered the craziness of Goblin Town last edition when they had that going for them too.
Every goblin could pierce or two-handed pierce. So the next special strike we'll be covering is the stun, which you could use with clubs and staffs. I think this is the only one that does not stack with two-handed. I think it's intentional because in the rules it doesn't say if you're two-handed stunning, you get a +1. Basically what a stun is, it's also a non-lethal strike. You declare it before the fight, and if you win on a 5+, it used to be a 4+, but now it's on a 5+. On a 5+, or a 6 if your target is a monster, the victim is reduced to a fight of 1 and an attacks of 1 and a shoot value of 6+ until the end of the next turn. So this is kind of like a channel transfix, but they can still move and they can still act as normal. It's just they become very weak the following turn.
This is like the Hobbit's bread and butter.
You don't see a lot of stuns.
Yeah,
maybe in Scouring the Shire, both sides can stun.
Yeah, I think that's just because there's not a lot of models that are actually modeled with it. Like, there's wizards, hobbits, and I guess, ruffians.
Every model in Far Harad has a club, I think.
Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, true. Far Harad's even better than we thought. Amazing.
Well, we haven't agreed that stun is good yet.
Well, Far Harad usually just kills everything anyway, so it's not that big of an issue.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. With a half troll, you're not going to be stunning many people.
Hey, I have used it before. So the point of stun, I guess, is to hold up a model that you're fighting against that's more valuable than the model you're stunning with.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, you're giving up not striking them, but you make them next to useless for 1 turn. What I've done before is I've charged a Mahud warrior into, like, a mounted big beatstick hero, and I'll say that I'm going to stun before the fight. Because it's always a difficult option because I can choose to shield or stun, and you can only pick one. Shielding, you're rolling 2 dice. Yes, your odds of winning goes up, but against, like, a charging, like, 4-attack Aragorn, what are your chances compared to rolling 1 die, right? I don't know how much more likely it is to win with 2 dice and a lower fight value, but if you do win with that 1 dice, 33% chance that Aragorn will be useless next turn. So I've done it before. It hasn't worked out yet.
I think it's definitely a thing if they charge into like 2 guys and then you have the 2 spear supports behind, you definitely would just stun with both of them. Like this is kind of like Bash where you're trying to use it to set something up for the next turn, right? It's just not a ton of models have it. Like, besides the Far Harad list, is there anything else besides that? Hobbits and wizards and ruffians? Like
Pretty
those...
much. In the odd hero that has a club or a staff, like maybe a
Yeah.
couple of the shamans
I
have a
think
staff.
maybe
Gundabad
like
troll.
Malbeth has one.
Gundabad troll.
I think Malbeth has it.
Would you ever stun with a Gundabad troll? The Gundabad troll can already knock down with the crushing club.
Yeah, that's probably better.
What if you stunned the Watcher in the water? Then all the tentacles would hit on a 6 the following turn.
See, that's good. He sucks you behind the line, and he's just like, no! I'll teach you to be rude to me. Like, I like this special strike a lot, honestly. It's just, you just never get the chance to play it. Because, like, the only time I would ever get to do it is, like, on a wizard. But then, if my wizard is fighting, like, they're probably gonna die. Or they're just gonna be fighting a normal warrior, so I just want them to kill the warrior and leave.
Yeah, it's not just how few models have this. They also have to be fighting a really valuable target, right? So, like, how often are you going to have Gandalf fighting, like, I don't know, like a Sauron, right? To be able to consider it.
Or maybe the Balrog.
Yes, yeah, that's thematic. I guess if Gandalf was fighting the Balrog, you might opt to stun, because a Balrog being only fight one in one attack, you basically take away his free hero combat the next turn too, right?
Yeah, it'd be like a 6 to wound anyway, so you might as well just go for the 6+, right? Because it's a 6 to stun monster.
It's even harder than a 6. I think it's 6x4s.
No, but he'd be strength 5.
Oh, he's strength 5.
Oh, right.
But still, though, like, I think a 6+ to do that kind of like a stun on a monster like that is still really useful, right? Because most of the time when you're fighting monsters, you're gonna need a 6 to wound them anyway.
Yeah. Okay, and the final special strike is Whirl. And you can whirl with flails, scourges, and whips. So when you choose to whirl, you reduce your fight value to 1 after all modifiers. So you can't modify this fight value. And if you win, every model in the fight takes a strike from your whirler, the person who whirls. I've only seen this done in like a super casual game where an opponent wanted to just see what it did. Besides that, not really.
This one basically only comes up when that one Goblin Town model that has that like flail charges 2 models, and the guy's just like, might as well flail, and then the goblin dies.
Knife fighters.
Oh god, actually that'd be so gross. Like, if you charge that one goblin into like 4 or 5 elves and he somehow wins, and you just bonk, 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 because they're all D3.
It sounds like it doesn't affect spear supports, though. It says engage in a fight, right? And spear supports don't really count.
Yeah, no, it's everybody who's base to base. So it's just... Can you spear support a model that is whirling even?
Doesn't say you can't.
Okay, you used to not be able to. Okay, so maybe it is a bit better now. But, like, okay, actually, it might actually have a use then. Because I think it used to be that you'd hit the guy behind you who's spear supporting. Maybe it isn't now.
I think the only time I would be comfortable using this is if I'm facing people with -1s. So, for example, if I'm fighting with the Witch King with an army of 2-handed warriors, which is not very likely. But I guess a more likely scenario is if Witch King is an Angmar and I have a Shade behind him. So, Witch King with the might, he has a good chance of still getting that 6. And then you're surrounded. The highest the warrior can push up to is a 5. Then I guess that's something that you can go for.
I guess this is obvious, but if you can take the stone flail, then you always use it.
On Azog, yeah. Well, that's only on the armor profile, right?
Yeah. But then he doesn't go down to fight 1, so it's almost like it's a different special strike.
Yeah. Azog is a special case in this situation because he only drops 1 fight value, which is him dropping to fight 6 is still a big thing. But I still don't think it's that useful though. The only time you use it is if he's on foot and he's fighting a whole bunch of like more than 3 troops.
Well, he does also get the D3 wounds, so that's another reason to use it, and the burly.
But then like, would he still wounding a hero on a 3+?
Yep, you can't modify that.
So I don't know if I count. I was like, that's such a corner case, like you're saying. It's so different.
I do know of one use of normal flails and whips, and that is like to use it as a non-lethal option, similar to the previous strikes that we talked about.
Again?
So let's say you don't want to kill your enemy, and you have like the Balrog, and you want to use his whip, and you bring the Balrog's fight value down to 1 so that you don't kill whoever you're fighting.
You'll still probably kill if you win.
If you don't want to kill the model you're fighting, then you whirl so that you have fight 1.
Like
yeah, bigger chance of you losing that fight.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because then even if he's only fighting 1 model, he'd only make 1 strike against that 1 model. Oh,
yes, that's right. He doesn't get the 4 attacks.
I see what you're saying now. Okay, interesting. Okay.
Wow, so it's actually quite interesting. We have an extra non-lethal option.
It's not non-lethal. It's less lethal.
It's pretty much non-lethal.
Like compared to the rest of them, you're still doing a die roll to see if you do a wound, right? So the other ones, you're just knocking them over and then you're done.
And I guess I can also note that it looks like you can go two-handed Whirl, like because with the Witch Kings is a two-handed flail, so I guess you get that +1 on all of them, all his strikes. So force multiplier, kind of, not really.
That's like that's like a Hail Mary thing, though. Like if your Witch King is surrounded by, I'm assuming like you're trying to use this to kill, so he'd have to be fighting 4 models base to base, which means he's trapped.
Dude, you're gonna have the crown.
Yeah, do you really want to like put him down to fight value 1 with a -1 just so you can have 1 extra chance to strike? No.
Yes.
No. Like this is like
You absolutely want that, Ian. Come on.
if you're just like absolutely desperate to like break the opponent, you're like, I need to get 4 kills this turn to break him, otherwise I lose no matter what. It's worth it for like it's such a niche case when you're gonna use this. I don't know.
I need 4 kills and I have 1 combat left against 4 troops.
Honestly, I think I don't want to go into like balancing these, but I think to make it like just usable, it should just go down to like half your fight, or maybe down by 1 fight and not allowed to strike. I think that's already a big penalty.
I'd say half fight.
Yeah, because like Berserker Blade is like a better version of it, and we already barely see it used. So the Berserker Blade, he gets to keep his fight value, and it strikes spears too and supports.
Isn't that?
But he has to go two-handed.
Yeah, so that there's still a negative to it, right?
And it hits friendlies.
Yeah, so there's still a lot of negatives to that.
Yeah, so I still think the Berserker Blade might be like a slightly better version of a Whirl.
I agree. Just because it hits the supports. Yeah,
and you get to keep your fight 4.
So, would any of you guys consider paying the 1 point on troops or the 5 points on a hero to swap out the weapon for a different one?
I think I've seen axes done a few times, but other than that, I don't think I've seen anyone this edition do it. Have you guys?
I can't think of anything. Honestly, I think if I were to do it, I don't know if I would do axes. I mean, you could, but that's one where you have to do it en masse to really like get the bigger difference. And I feel like there's better ways to get extra ways to wound. Whereas with like stun or bash, it actually adds in a different tactical flexibility for you. So that's one where it might be more worthwhile. And I can't believe I'm saying that, honestly. But the more I'm thinking about it now, yeah, because it adds in like just like I said earlier, get an extra thing into your toolbox, right? Whereas the piercing strike is just like, oh, I might be able to damage you more, but I have other things that can already damage, right?
Probably just really niche situations. Like the one I can think of right now is to give Grima a non-lethal option. Because right now, if he accidentally wins a fight and he scores a wound, then he's revealed.
But then he actually has a weapon too, right? Because isn't he? Or no, he has
a dagger.
He has a dagger.
He's not unarmed. So give him like a staff or something. I don't know.
That's dirty. I actually like that. No. Actually, you know what you would want to do is you want to give him bash, right? The hammer. If he gets trapped by 3 guys, which is like anti-Grima tactic, right? He gets trapped by 3 guys. If he wins the fight and knocks one of them prone, that one guy loses his control zone. So then if you win the priority next turn, then you can actually run out of that bubble of 3 guys. Because normally you just get stuck by the control zones. So that's actually hilarious. It might be worth it on Grima.
I just noticed it says only unnamed heroes.
No, I never noticed that clause. I thought it was any hero. Oh,
warrior or unnamed hero. There goes all our dreams and our filth.
That makes more sense though, because then you can have your unnamed captains be a bit more unique.
Sorry to burst your bubble again, guys. I just read in the Army's book, Grima can actually already choose not to strike. So we kind of had that discussion for nothing then.
I still like the Grima idea. It's so funny. And it makes sense, yeah. Damn.
Yeah, we're going to get hate mail, guys, being like, I converted my Grima, now I can't use him.
Okay, so if we were to just quickly rank these 5 special strikes, my prediction is that our opinions will be pretty similar. So are we going to put Piercing Strike at number 1? If we're going to factor in its availability as well. So, like, some of them are harder to access.
I mean, Feint or Stab is probably the most available one, but it's not as good as Pierce, so I think I'd still put Pierce first, because it is the second most available, but I think it is better in terms of usability.
Yep, agree.
And then Feint and Stab second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Third, I want to say Bash.
Yeah.
Bash. No, it's definitely Bash.
Like stun has a bigger potential, but it's more rare and it's less reliable because you need the
Yeah.
5+.
It's harder to get into your list and it's harder to pull off.
And then
So-
I guess the last two is easy.
Stun
Stun
and
would be
Whirl.
4th.
Yeah.
Stun is 4th
Yeah.
and Whirl is 5th.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to try and make a joke about how I whited out Whirl in my rule book because it's so useless, but
If any of the listeners have had a success with Whirl, please let us know on Facebook in the comments on the Facebook page.
Yeah, please do. Stun and Bash, I think, are still they actually are pretty good. It's so hard to get them in your lists.
Please let us know if anyone has heroic challenge with the Witch King and then two-handed flail to Whirl and actually win the combat.
You double dare me?
Why would you do that? I'm going to heroic challenge you, and then I'm only going to try and hit you once because I'm a cool guy. Like, what the fuck? Fart. What the fart? I said fart.
All right, I think that has been our discussion of special strikes. Thank you all for listening. Look forward to the next episode of Into the West podcast.